That's fun.
Well, and it's because they're on purpose and in purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing that I think most founders forget when they're in the grind, right? They're just doing the thing over and over again because it pays enough. But what happens, and I think this is probably where your expertise really comes in, Michelle, because uh, your relationship with money is very important on the backside of a liquidity event. If you have worthiness issues, you're going to find ways to get rid of that money as quickly as possible. If you are scarcity minded, you're going to hoard it. Right. And
Yeah.
so people and their relationship with money, it comes out in a very big and real way on the backside of liquidity event because, I mean, they probably have one or two extra zeros in their bank account, and most people don't know what to do with that type of windfall.
Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and this is going to be a great episode. You know, we talk about everything money. So sometimes we're talking about building your career and building your business and all the relationship with money topics that we cover. Today we're going kind of to the end of the road. So this is a little different, and I'm excited because we're going to talk about actually exiting, your business. That doesn't mean your career's over, but let's talk about what it does mean with an expert. So today I have on the show Jerome Myers, and I'm going to give you a little info on him. He is a seasoned business leader and exit strategist, is renowned for his deep insights into the founder's exit paradox, a complex emotional journey founders undergo when detaching from their ventures. Jerome's expertise lies in his ability to navigate and support others through his intricate emotional and psychological landscape, encompassing a myriad of behavioral, affective, and cognitive processes. With experience building a $20 million division for a Fortune 500 company, his holistic approach addresses the challenges faced during significant life transitions. Jerome's coaching and podcast guides leaders through this transformative phase, asking the vital question, are you ready for your next exit? And there's something else that I noticed in his material. He says, an exit leads to your next arrival, which I loved that quote. So, Jerome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's awesome to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. This is really, I think, an interesting topic to cover because we spend so much of our life just figuring out and doing and trying to gain success through our work. And, it takes up a good deal of our thought and energy in life. And you're talking about kind of what happens after that. And so we don't really think about that part. And a lot of us have a real problem because we didn't plan or think about that. So why don't you tell us how you got into this topic in the first place?
I was in the back of a business conference and a guy was giving his 7 steps to a double unicorn exit. For those who don't know what a unicorn is, that's when your business has a valuation of over $1 billion. So he's teaching us how to have a $2 billion valuation on our exit. And he was going through the presentation. He said, I told my wife that I was going to In-N-Out Burger to get something to eat. And she told me to pick up a job application while I was there. And I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And so he gets to the end and he starts taking questions. And I get the mic and I say, hey, are you ready for this? He said, I don't know. Would you opening it up like that? And I said, well, how'd you get out of your crisis? And he said, well, I'll let you know when I do. And before that, I asked him, well, how'd you know you were in a crisis? He said, my wife told me. And so the crisis is, he called it an existential crisis. I don't know that that's actually what it was, but that's the best words that he had for it. Today, we call that the founder's exit paradox. And it's when you go through this feelings of loss, when you separate your identity from the identity of the business. For many people, this is a very tough experience because they've spent 20, 30, 40 years working on something. And it doesn't matter if you're just retiring from a job or you're the founder of a company. The founder's exit paradox is something that you're going to experience. And so when I left that meeting, I started doing research because I was like, if the guy that presumably has a 9-figure net worth doesn't have access to the resources to help him with his crisis, then what do regular folks do? And I found one article. It was a Harvard Business Review article, and it said, congratulations, you sold your business. Prepare to be depressed. And I was like, it can't be that grim. And then the more research I did, the more grim it got. 75% of business owners regret selling their business. 2 in 10 businesses are able to successfully sell once they get listed. And we just kept going down the list of how rare it is for somebody to exit their business and be happy on the backside.
Wow. Okay. That is really cool and really interesting that there wasn't more out there. So, so, so you now help people with this process.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I've committed to doing 14 more years of this work.
Wow. Okay. And why 14? I have to ask. How'd you come up with
Well,
that?
so I started out with 15. This is my next. We've had a few exits over the course of my career. And so it was like, well, how can I get meaning? How can I make a difference? And for me, the people that I'm supposed to be serving are founders. And the problem I'm supposed to be helping them with is figuring out what they can do in the next chapter of their life.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, I mean, I personally am not a big believer in retirement. I mean, sure, change and do something else, but I don't even know what retirement means. Like, I don't know how to not work, I guess. But
Yeah.
so it's interesting to think about, the course of your life. And we had this like demarcation point where people retire. I don't really think that's as relevant these days as it used to be. I think that was a great concept for people who were grinding it out for 40 years in jobs they didn't enjoy. And then, they're pretty excited to not do that anymore. But I mean, what are your thoughts on retirement in, 2025 anyway?
I think retirement's a curse word for a lot of folks, and I get it because they see that people pass away pretty shortly after they retire, or they're miserable, or whatever unpositive or thing that's not positive that people associated with it. So what we prefer to say is becoming work optional, because work optional is a function of solving the money problem.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of merge what you were describing with people grinding it out for 40 years, we're dealing with inflation, we're dealing with things just being much more expensive now and people living longer. The ability to not have to work is something that escapes a lot of folks. And it's not just because they want something to do, it's because financially they have to. And so it's our belief that if somebody builds a business and it's one that is able to be sold, then they absolutely should have the liquidity event. And that liquidity event is going to pull out the vast majority of their net worth, because for most business owners, 80% of their net worth is wrapped up in the business.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think about that? Is that smart? Is that, a function of you? I don't know. I never know whether that is considered. It's natural. It's what business owners do. From a money standpoint, I think people have to be careful of, underpaying themselves when they have a business. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the greatest tragedy that a business owner can experience is working on something for 30 years and not getting the payday. I think it's not only a tragedy for them, but I think it's for a tragedy for the people that sacrifice the time that they would have had with them in order for them to build the thing, because in concept, the money is the reward for it. I believe that founders should be rewarded. And as far as it being a smart investment or not, the ability to grow your wealth is going to be tied. You're going to have a greater impact or influence on that if you keep it in the business. Now, should you take chips off the table? Absolutely. Should you do everything you can to have a liquidity event for your company? I believe that you should. Do everybody have that level of success? They don't. And so, if you listen to Warren Buffett and a bunch of other folks, they'll say, hey, diversification is for those people who aren't sure and those who don't know what they're doing. You can make way more money on investment in your business than you can if you put it in the stock market and get 6 to 8% or whatever it is now. If you put that same money in a salesperson or advertising, assuming you pick well, you can get multiple returns on that money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And the people that I know who have successfully sold a business, most of them had the idea for exiting pretty early on. So they sort of built their business with selling it eventually in mind. But not all business owners do that. What do you recommend on that?
I think everybody should plan on it. There's only 3 ways out of a business, Michelle. The first is to sell it, and that's my favorite one. That's why I say it first. The next one is giving it away. It's my second favorite because you actually get to decide what happens. And then the third one is closing it. Those are only 3 ways out of the business. And even if you pass away, one of those 3 things is going to happen with the business. So it's not as if the fate of your business isn't the same. With that said, there's only one of those where you actually get paid. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's great even if you want to give it to somebody, that you sell it to them so they have some skin in the game and they have to make sure that the business is successful versus just giving it to them and them not really having anything at risk other than the business closing. But, some people want to be, I guess they're a little more generous than I am. But I believe that most folks don't have the ability to just give away 80% of their net worth. And so when they don't sell it, they do things like keep salaries from the business. And that, I think, is probably less efficient than having a clean transaction. And then on the backside, maybe if they want to leave something to the folks that they sold the business to, maybe that can transfer back after they expire, but then they don't need the resources anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And I do think it's something that while you're building a business, it's not always part of the thought process and the planning, but it should be. And so,
well, it's funny that you bring that up because we found 4 ways that people have to exit their business unexpectedly. Mm. And because they exit unexpectedly, you would think that the business would be, the better the business is prepared for exit, the better off the business is. And so there's burnout, which is the B, but then there's death, divorce, and disease. Mm. And those 2 of those 3 can pop up kind of unexpectedly. Right. I think a lot of people kind of see the divorce coming because they haven't been investing in their relationship, although sometimes people get blindsided by divorce as well. But those 4 things can happen kind of unexpectedly. And if you're not preparing your business so that if you need to liquidate, you can and get a great valuation, I think you're doing everybody a disservice that's involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's another one of those things where we put it off and we think, oh, yeah, one of these days, I'll give some thought to that. And then if the event happens and you haven't. So I do a lot of shows around aging and taking care of aging parents and all the unexpected things that pop up. And your business is kind of, it's a lot of the conversations are the same when it comes to your business. So as you age, your things are going to impact you and your business. So that's a piece that gets left out as well. But, it's interesting what you do because business owners are notoriously busy. And so it is hard to stop and think about all of these things and even give thought to the next step. So when you approach people, where are they in the process and how do you get this going?
Yeah, so we're most effective when folks are in a 5 year band, 3 years before they want to exit, or 2 years after they exit,
Hmm.
because in that window, they're still not really deep in the hole if they haven't figured it out yet. And so that's our window. But we want to talk to people who are new in business and say, hey, you want to make decisions now that are not going to put you in a space where your business isn't exitable later. And what's that mean? Well, if the business is solely dependent on you and you've progressed past the chief everything officer role, which we talk about in our 8X's framework, if you're past that, but you're still making it such that nothing can actually function or happen without you in the business, you are justifying your value to the business, and you're also doing a great job of making your business very invaluable. And so we want folks to be thinking about the end as quickly as possible. I think Stephen Covey talked about it in the Seven Habits. He talks about beginning with the end in mind. And the fact of the matter is, you're going to exit your business one day. It's just a matter of how.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. As you're talking, this used to be, it's funny because we didn't used to plan so much. Like I said, we were talking about retirement. I mean, there was a time when it was just sort of this blanket, I'll be retired, and you'd think about whatever you might do there. Things are so different now. Things are changing so rapidly that it's hard to imagine the state of your business 20 years from now when, I mean, everything right now feels like it's in flux and a bit chaotic and changing really fast from, politics to AI, everything's going on. It's almost hard to think about where is my business going to be, and for some people, I fear that there is going to be an undesired exit needed because maybe their business won't be relevant anymore. Are you addressing any of these kinds of things?
So, I mean, we got to have the conversation, and, everybody's got an optimal window for exiting from their business. Many people miss it. Maybe they're just trying to get it to that next level so that they can get a more lucrative valuation so that they can get a little bit more money in their pocket when they exit. Other people it's like, oh, I'm having fun. I don't want to exit right now. I don't want to think about that. And at the end of the day, it's totally their choice whether or not they exit then. They just need to know that they're potentially leaving money on the table. There's different industries that are really interesting or getting new interest from strategic buyers. That in and of itself may have somebody sell a little prematurely, but they may get additional valuation when they exit. So I say all that to say the goal is to be exit ready so that when the opportunity shows up, you're able to take advantage of it. Many folks believe that there's going to be a line wrapped around the building when they say, okay, I'm ready to retire, I'm ready to exit. And the fact of the matter is only 20% of businesses that get listed actually successfully transact. And so you might feel like, hey, I'm 1 in 5. But for most folks, that's just not true. Because for everybody that says I'm 1 of 5, there's 4 other people who wouldn't be the ones that successfully complete the process.
So what are you seeing that kind of makes the difference?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different factors. The one that nobody ever really talks about, though, is personal readiness. And so, their brokers will show up and say, hey, here's your valuation. The documentation people will say, hey, do you have all of your processes documented and a flow chart? The EOS implementers will say, hey, do you have your meeting cadence set up? Do you have your big rocks? Do you have your projections? The CFO is going to say, are your books clean? But for me, the thing I think that's most important is, do you know what you're going to do next? Because if you know what you're going to do next and you're excited about what you're going to do next, then you're actually going to follow through on all of the things that seem like a headache that you need to do in order for you to actually exit. And what we find more than anything else is that people just don't complete the task. And so one of two things happens. The buyers lose interest, or they devalue the company in a way where the seller then loses interest. And because they don't have a compelling vision for the future, they decide to just stay in the comfort of the certainty of what they have today.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. I mean, you bring up so many good points. Staying in your comfort zone, of course, can be comfortable, but also a big trap. And so many of us in so many areas of life will do that. So good thing to be aware of. But yeah, there's so much there to unpack, because one of the things I loved most about what you just said is that need for a vision. And I mean, I get a lot of coaching, and maybe I've just been, I have so much of this in my life all the time, but having a vision is just so important, and knowing your why. And so, I'm constantly visioning all the time, my business, my life. But it's become kind of a regular practice. And I think whenever you have a vision, something pulling you forward, it's so much more enjoyable. Like, there's something to look forward to. I mean, it's as simple as that, really. So I do think a lot of people, I find it hard to do, and I'm pretty good at it. I do it a lot. And so it's not always easy to find that next vision that really moves you. How do you do it? Like, how do you suggest people do it?
I suggest that they do our next intensive. We do a 2-hour interview where we understand it exactly how they got to where they are. I mean, we dig into the 6 centers of doubt. So we talk through their self-image, their relationships and work, their health, their prosperity, and what they see as significance, and really get dialed in on, hey, what really makes you tick? Then we take and process it and create basically a 35-page report, which then I spend 2 hours with the person going through it. And they have one set of instructions. Argue with me about whatever we got wrong in this report. And fortunately, nobody's been able to argue with us about whether or not we were accurate. And in that report, we actually share with them, hey, here's your people that you should be serving, and here's the problem you should be solving for them. And they either agree with us or they don't. And again, we've had 100% hit rate on what they should be doing. And for us, once we add in a compelling why, folks get emotional and they start taking that action to move into that new space.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. That's a great process. And we need a process. This isn't really something that you do. I don't feel people in general do well on their own. I do feel like you have to be guided by questions and somebody, who's given this a lot of thought. Otherwise, your mind goes all over the place as to what a vision could be. I mean,
I think you are hitting the nail on the head there, because the thing that I think most people forget is it's really tough to read the label on the jar. And so you live with yourself every day of your life. To have an observer come in and point out things, and this is part of our 4-step process for moving into your next. And so it's N for nourish. Founders don't do a great job of nourishing. They don't pause and reflect and think about what transferable skills they have or what they've been really good at doing. Many of them just think about what they have done, and they spend time fearing doing something else because they might not be good at it. And this is the thing that they were actually good at. And, our ability to actually help them see that they can do more than just run the company that they started, and that they can have bigger impact than for the thing that they've been doing for all these years in order to earn money. It just kind of flips things on their head and gives them a new perspective, which I don't think most people spend the time exploring.
Oh, I love that. I've done a lot of career coaching over the last 15 years. It's actually how my company started. And you're right. With people who are in career transition, you spend enormous amount of time looking at, what are your strengths, what are your transferables, what are your skills, and then what are the transferable skills and how. And you really dig into, just purpose and all of these things with somebody who is wanting to change jobs. And yet with a business owner, you're right. They are. It becomes almost like, you're a machine and you're just doing your business and you do lose perspective and you've probably gained more skills than you could have doing anything else, but you're not taking any time to think about it. I mean, as a business owner, at some point you probably learned every aspect of business. You learned marketing and management and finance and admin and everything else because you probably had to do it at some point. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
That is the magic, Michelle. You have to, especially when you're chief everything officer. So we've identified 8 exits that founders go through. Most people only talk about the liquidity event, which is exit 6. But the ones before that, and chief everything officer is the one that I want to highlight right now. You had to figure it all out. Even if it was you figured it out because the IRS sent you a letter, or you figured it out because the company or the state corporation commission dissolved your company, or you figured it out because you didn't have the right license. You figured it out because you are a founder, you're resilient, and you probably don't ever want to go back to that. But I don't know that you have to because you have learned so many things over the years. And that knowledge applied against a different problem is super value and can break frames and create efficiencies that maybe people who live that in that industry cannot see.
Yeah, it's so interesting. As you're talking, I'm wondering how much your financial situation and your financial well-being plays into this, not the decision necessarily to exit, that's kind of obvious, but into what you do next. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you dig into that?
So it's always our goal for the person to be work optional on the backside of their liquidity event. And it doesn't always happen, but it's the thought in the ideal situation is you're work optional, which means you have complete control over your time, your energy, and then the talents or the money. And so with those 3 resources to allocate, how can you be a fiduciary? How can you be a great manager of those? Because you're free to do what you want to do with them now. And I think most people only think about being a fiduciary when it comes to, oh, well, let me make sure I manage the money well. Well, the other 2 are probably as important because, no, I'll say they're more important because you can't recreate them. Once the time elapses, it's gone. Once you expend the energy, you might get a refresh for the next day after taking some time to recoup, but that energy that you expended is gone. And so we live in this world where most people will prize the money over the time because it's easier to count. But if you had an actual countdown timer to the point where you're going to expire, I think people would think about this just a little bit differently. And so now it comes to the heart of what you asked, which is, hey, well, what about the money? So it's my belief that you're probably going to make more in the second act, and you're going to make it sooner and quicker than you did in the first one because you're actually pursuing what we call a passion. And so if you are actually pursuing your passion, you're helping the right people and you're helping them with the right problem, we found that it makes magic. And most people are like, oh, well, I'm just going to do a philanthropic thing and da 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 da. The issue with that is that you usually have to fundraise on the backside of those. And most people that I know in the nonprofit world hate fundraising. They just want to do the work. So imagine if you could create something that got the work done, served people who had a real problem, not just people who can't do things for themselves, but people who have a problem. And they saw enough value in it that they were willing to trade dollars for that so that this thing can continue to work. And then imagine that you scale it to the place where you don't actually have to do it. And now this thing can go into perpetuity, which then leads to what your true legacy becomes.
Wow. Yeah, this is fascinating. I love what you said. And I've known people who retired from, maybe they had a high level executive job with a company and they retired from that or whatever, they ended it. And then they went on to do something else, maybe almost accidentally. Like I have one guy in mind, and people were coming at him to do consulting work, and he was doing it here and there without really thinking about it. And suddenly, a couple years down the road, he was making way more money than he had made before. He had so much more time. He never expected that, didn't plan it, nothing. It just, but he was happy and he was enjoying it, and it just sort of blossomed into this new career. But you're right, it's not the only example I have of second chapters or third chapters, whatever chapter it ends up being, where the people are actually happier, doing better, and making more money when they don't really even need the money anymore. So that's
Well,
fun.
and it's because they're on purpose and in purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing that I think most founders forget when they're in the grind, right? They're just doing the thing over and over again because it pays enough. But what happens, and I think this is probably where your expertise really comes in, Michelle, because your relationship with money is very important on the backside of a liquidity event. If you have worthiness issues, you're going to find ways to get rid of that money as quickly as possible. If you are scarcity minded, you're going to hoard it. Right. And
Yeah.
so people and their relationship with money, it comes out in a very big and real way on the backside of liquidity event because, I mean, they probably have one or two extra zeros in their bank account, and most people don't know what to do with that type of windfall.
Wow, I love that you brought that up. That is so true, except that, I mean, there's no except. It's just that, but you never talk about it at that way. Don't talk about it as much on that end of the spectrum. It's all about your relationship with money early on, and you think you kind of have it down by the time you get to this point. But you're right; it's a new level, new devil, as my mentor says. I mean, it's just different, but it's that stuff is going to come up, and especially when you're not, if you're earning either differently or maybe you're not earning anymore. And there's a whole bunch of new messages coming into your subconscious about what that means for your life and your family and
Yeah.
everything.
So, most people who are buying businesses want to buy income streams. And by virtue of you selling the income stream, your is cut off.
Yeah.
And so you've got the nest egg now, and you got to decide what you're going to do. For us, Exit 7 is the post-exit portfolio. And so we think folks are probably going to spend some time investing in things that are going to recreate some income for them. Some people don't do that. Some people just put it under a mattress. Other people think they should just give it all away. At the end of the day, it's totally their choice on what they do. But the post-exit portfolio is a step in the process of the 8 exits of the founder. And we believe that if you can learn how to invest well, and for some people, that just means I just give it to a financial advisor and let them put it in the market, or I go buy some type of mutual fund that mimics the S&P 500. For some people, that's the right answer. For other people, they're more interested in putting money in companies and becoming a minority owner or sitting on the board. And that for them is going to be something that gets them excited because they get to mentor a founder who's still building. There's so many different options, and I think it's really important for people to choose that with some intentionality.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And you're right. When you think about it, it would be really sad to go through all of that, get to that point, and then be in that scarcity mentality and be afraid to spend the money that you spent your life, earning and put it under the mattress, like you say, because that's what did you buy yourself there? Just a life of, being nervous that you're going to live too long, which is ridiculous. But yeah.
Well, is it though? Because I mean, I've seen a lot of people who didn't save well, right? And then they were relying on their kids or somebody
True.
else to take care of them. And so it can be a very scary situation when you know that no more is coming in. And if you don't have a plan, if you don't have guidance, if you don't have the right advisors, you can get yourself in a pickle pretty quick.
Well, that's you are absolutely right. Yeah. And you know, you're right. So the reality of it is that while it feels a little, I use the word ridiculous from a mindset standpoint, the reality of what you're talking about makes it not that because it's your life. So, and yeah, in many cases, I do think that yeah, it's so important to think about this stuff ahead of time again, because if you don't, that's where you may end up. And, you know, life hits you with all kinds of things. So you might plan really well and still have this kind of an issue. So it's complicated. And you're right. It can be challenging. So if you are faced with something like that, do you have people pivot in terms of, you know, maybe do something else that is more income generating? Or how do you deal with somebody who's in a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want it to be a surprise that they ended up in that situation. The hope is that they have had some financial security while building the business. I know every founder at some point has been stuck with the dilemma of how do I figure out payroll or how
Right.
do I make sure that I pay the creditors and so on and so forth. Got that. But there comes a point where your business reaches some level of stability, and barring something like a pandemic, there's some predictability in the income, and so it's our hope that we have a clear understanding of what it takes to actually pay for your lifestyle
Yeah.
in in retirement or in the work optional phase. We also want to understand what that looks like, and then make sure that we have enough either income generating assets that are sending some type of dividend to us, or that we just got enough money saved so that we can ride it out to whatever age we expect to live. I think most financial planners are putting 99 years in at this point.
Wow.
And so, if you've got enough money to last you that long, assuming that you don't have any unexpected medical expenses come up or things of that nature, you should have a pretty solid plan. And so there's a whole lot of professionals out there that can create a financial plan for you. And I think as long as you stick to the plan, you can end up in a pretty great spot. Where I think things get really messy, Michelle, is when somebody's going to give the business away and they might not be taking a salary, or they choose not to ready their business for sale. And then they get caught with death, disease, burnout, or divorce, and they have to liquidate it prematurely. And then they find out that what they were able to get when they liquidate isn't what they needed in order to fund their next phase. And so now they're in a space where, hey, you can choose what you want to do, and you can choose more passion. You can choose to work more with who you believe are the right people, and even choose to work on that problem that you think should be eradicated from the face of the planet. But you don't have the same luxury. You don't, like, money's kind of like grease, right? And so when you're getting started, you may have to put more time in. You might have to make more stuff versus buying it or getting an expert to help you with it, which then leads to more trial and error. And I mean, founders usually figure out how to bootstrap things, but on the second mountain, you probably don't want to bootstrap it. You probably want to take advantage of the ability to invest in the project to get it to product market fit quicker.
Yeah, yeah, so interesting. So, like, what's kind of the age group or some demographics around the people that you typically help with this, if there is any?
Yeah, so I mean, we're hanging out with the boomers. Uh, they're hanging out with the boomers and a little bit of Gen X, and the upper end of Gen X. And the goal here, I mean, there's so much wealth concentrated in that group. There's so much business owners, so many business owners concentrated in that group. And we're helping those folks in their 50s, 60s figure out what they're going to do, because for a lot of people, I mean, that's like halftime. If you're healthy, you can do a whole lot more for many years instead of spending a bunch of time sitting around playing golf, gardening, and chasing grandkids, which it sounds great in the beginning, but I think for one, the grandkids grow up.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to be in school if they're not in school already, and what do you do from 8 to 3 while they're off doing that? If your whole existence is to hang out with them, it becomes you find out very quickly that those G's don't actually end up being the things that are going to fill your life.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying that there's plenty of time left because I happen to be one of them. So I'm happy to hear that, and it is true. And what you've said throughout this podcast that I think helps people live longer and live happily is purpose. Having some meaning and purpose in your life, however that actualizes itself for you, but. I think that makes all the difference. So, for some, the grandkids are a purpose, but I think you're talking about having a kind of a broader view of that. What else can you do with your life?
Well, I think they're part of it, right? I don't think they're the sole purpose. I think they're a part of it. And, we spend time helping folks optimize over 6 areas. So again, it's your self-image, relationships, which grandkids fit in along with kids, spouse, former co-workers, although you usually lose most of those when you leave the business, and then folks out in the community. But we really focus on people working to have 5 people, really 5 or 6 people who can really drive excitement and fulfillment from the exchanges in those relationships. And then, the work is, we hope, a smaller piece of the time that they invest in this work optional period. Health, mobility, longevity, like that is something that I think is so important and so many people overlook when they're thinking through aging gracefully, which is magical. My dad jumped out of airplanes while he was in the military in his 20s and 30s, and now he's got pretty chronic arthritis. And so it's very difficult for him to sit and stand, or to go from sit to stand and stand to sit. And so for me, it's really painful to watch him go through that.
Yeah.
And, we do what we can to try to reduce that pain.
Right.
But at the same point, like, the damage has been done, and that was done a long time ago. There are some diseases that are just degenerative, and you can't get that back. But there's a lot of things that you can. So if you got a lot of excess weight, getting that off, making sure you're sleeping well and you got great hydration so your skin stays nice and full and plump. There's just so many things that you can do so that people say, hey, you don't look your age, when they start talking about how old you are, and you don't feel your age. And so if we go back to grandkids, you can actually chase grandkids and pick them up and enjoy that time with them, or crawl on the floor with them, or whatever the thing is. And then the prosperity, really just enjoying the time, talent, and treasures that you have, and really using them well to make the world a better place, and then truly living out that legacy. And so what does that actually look like? And how do you know that you're going to be remembered? Because you get to write that book, right? As long as you're still in the dash on the tombstone, you get to decide what's going to be put out there and what you're going to be remembered for.
Yeah, beautifully said. That's great. And I love that you brought up time and energy and money. All 3 of those, in my opinion, are a form of currency. And you're right. We don't necessarily, while we're busy trying to, earn income, we don't necessarily focus in and have the proper awareness of where our time's going, where our energy's going. Although I find the 3 track pretty closely together. So if you're a person who is very nurturing and is always giving to others, you're probably giving them money, time, and energy. I mean, they do go together, and it works that way for whatever your personality type is. But very important things to focus on. And I think naturally, as you get older, you're paying a little more of attention to time and energy for sure. And it's great to have somebody like you help them or help anyone to really focus on that, look at it, track it, see what's going on with it. Because sometimes we don't know. We don't know where our time's going. We don't know where our energy's going.
Well, but you should know where your time is going because the calendar can tell you, right? And, if you want to know what a person values, I think you look at the calendar and you look at their bank account and you'll see what they truly believe in. And, when we have folks do that audit, and if they find something that's inconsistent with the legacy that they want to leave, then, they got to make some changes. We had a guy that we started working with in the fall, and he talked about being kind and thoughtful and generous. And then when we asked him, well, how much time did you give away or volunteer last year, and how much money did you give away? He was ashamed to say. And so if he wants to be known as a generous person, we've got to make some adjustments there. And he's already started doing that.
That's great. Yeah, that's another point, is helping people find that alignment with their values and their vision and what they're actually doing and thinking. So, yeah, that's great. Can you tell us a little about your book? You do have a book on this topic.
Yeah. So the book is called Exit to Excellence, and we take the main character, James, on a journey to finding his next. And, we walk him through our 4-step process of nourishing, evaluating, exploring, and transcending. And he finds what is going to bring him passion or bring him fulfillment. And he finds his people that he's going to do it for, and he solves that problem for them. And then they continue to find more, and the organization grows. And eventually he's able to leave that lasting legacy after exiting his business. And this second chapter for him is definitely more rewarding. And he has somebody called an advisor that helps him on that journey, helps him figure out where the turns and twists are so that he can be successful and not make a ton of mistakes or get frustrated and quit. And that, we believe, is the thing that makes the biggest difference for people who want to be efficient, people who are worried about success, people who are trying to figure out how they're going to exit with clarity and confidence. Having somebody that can help guide you through that portal and spend time with you on both sides so that when you walk through, there is some familiarity, because most things just kind of evaporate and vanish, including the people who are advising you on your transaction. We found that person is a whole lot happier with the choices that they make because they know that they've got somebody that's advocating for them.
Wow, that's great. And I love that you're highlighting this for people because it's really important. And there is this whole life ahead of you, after you liquidate your business or do whatever you're going to do to make this change. And it can leave people really lost. I'm sure you've seen that, where if they don't do the work you're talking about, they can find themselves just sitting and watching a lot of TV and kind of not knowing what to do with themselves. So,
yeah, I think there's a whole lot worse than that. There are people who end up in pretty severe depressed states.
Yeah.
And, that's why we kind of cut it off post-exit about 2 years after. Because if you haven't figured out what you're going to do then, it's not to say you're hopeless, but there's probably been some other things that have cropped up where having somebody that's a licensed professional is going to be really helpful. And then from there, once you get back kind of centered, we can help move them further down that path. Yeah. But I can tell you it gets really dark when people lose their purpose. They have a lot of time to sit around and they've got money. I think founders are like nuclear power plants. And with a nuclear power plant, if there's nothing to take the energy off of the reactor, then it starts to self-implode and eventually it can be a pretty large explosion.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for highlighting this. And so there's that side. There's also the side of what can happen if you do plan and work with somebody and make this work in your favor. Yeah, thank you, Jerome, so much for coming on. I think this was really enlightening and really interesting, and I hope it gets people thinking. And I would suggest people get your book and read it early. Like, don't wait until you're doing this, but use it as a guide for the future planning. But
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
yeah,
This was
thank you
awesome.
so much for being here. This was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. So, okay, and Jerome, can you tell people how to find you?
Yeah, if they want, they can take our free exit readiness assessment. It's at exittoexcellence.com. And then if they click the resources tab on the upper right hand corner, drop down and they can grab the exit readiness assessment as a gift to being a listener of this great podcast.
Thank you. All right. That's great. Thank you so much. And Money and You listeners, thank you for being here. We love it when you listen to the show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you know anybody in a situation where this could be helpful, please share the show with them and rate and review the show, because you doing that helps us to have great guests like Jerome on all the time. And so thank you so much. Love having you listen to the show. We'll see you next week. Take care.